In 2014, she was Silicon Valley's rising star. Today, her story is told in whispers and headlines. What could turn a celebrated innovator into the center of one of tech's most shocking scandals? Buckle up, because the rise and fall of Elizabeth Holmes is a wild ride of ambition, deception, and a reality check served cold. Elizabeth Holmes entered the scene with a bold dream and an even bolder presence. In 2003, at just 19 years old, she left Stanford University to start Theranos. This was a company she claimed would transform blood testing forever. They used a small, specially designed device to collect just a tiny drop of blood. That sample was then processed in the company's compact, in-housing testing machine, known as Edison. With this, patients wouldn't just avoid the discomfort of needles, they'd also pay less for tests that are often very expensive in the US healthcare system. Since Silicon Valley loves young visionaries, Holmes fits the role perfectly. She wore black turtlenecks like Steve Jobs, always drank green juice, and spoke in a surprisingly deep voice. Interestingly, some former employees believe she faked the voice to sound more commanding. Whether real or not, it became part of her mystique. By 2014, Theranos had soared to a $9 billion valuation. At only 30, Holmes was celebrated as the youngest self-made female billionaire. She was hailed as the next Steve Jobs and backed by powerful investors like Rupert Murdoch and the Walton family of Walmart fame. Forbes even ranked her above Oprah on its rich list, estimating her fortune at $4.5 billion. Holmes' unshakable gaze, confident speeches, and mission to change the world won over everyone, from venture capitalists to former US government officials. The media couldn't get enough. She was Silicon Valley's golden child, promising to make healthcare more accessible for all. But not everything is as perfect as it appears, and in this case, not every drop of blood delivers miracles. Holmes' rapid rise was only the first half of the story. The other half would be an equally dramatic fall. What happens when a visionary's dream crashes into reality? As the world would soon learn, the answer is as shocking as it is unforgettable. Now, before we get into that downfall, if you're enjoying this saga of ambition and excess, consider subscribing and hitting the like button. We dig into the wildest stories of the rich and famous every week. You won't want to miss what's next. Elizabeth Holmes had a vision, but there was one major problem. The technology at the heart of a company didn't work. Behind the closed doors of Theranos' heavily guarded labs, the much-hyped blood testing machines failed to give accurate results. In reality, many tests were secretly run on standard commercial lab equipment, even though the company claimed they were all done on its own Edison devices. By 2015, the truth began to surface. Two Theranos employees, Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz, suspected that something was seriously wrong inside the company. They noticed that some staff were altering data and test results from the company's supposedly groundbreaking Edison machine. Chung and Schultz decided they couldn't stay silent. They took their concerns to the Wall Street Journal. Soon after, journalist John Carreyrou began investigating, and what he uncovered shook Silicon Valley. His reporting revealed that the Edison device was used for only a small portion of the company's blood tests. Even then, its results were often inaccurate. This directly contradicted Elizabeth Holmes' repeated public claims that the technology could run hundreds of reliable tests from just a drop of blood. Carreyrou's work also brought to light a tragic story from within the company. Ian Gibbons, a respected Theranos scientist, had died by suicide in 2013. Colleagues said he'd been struggling under intense pressure and internal conflicts at work, casting an even darker shadow over the company's already secretive culture. As Carreyrou's investigation gained attention, more questions began to surface about Theranos' inner workings and the lengths it went to protect its image. So the Silicon Valley darling suddenly looked less like a unicorn and more like a mirage. The backlash was swift. Regulators launched investigations, investors felt deceived, and the company began to crumble. Around $900 million had been invested in Theranos, but now that trust was gone. Even worse, some patients received inaccurate results. It included false positives for serious conditions like cancer and HIV. What started as a promise to transform healthcare had turned into a cautionary tale. By 2018, Theranos had officially shut down, and Holmes went from a celebrated innovator to an infamous figure. That same year, federal prosecutors brought criminal charges against Holmes and a top executive, Ramesh Sunny Balwani. He also doubled as a secret boyfriend. Both were accused of defrauding investors and patients. Holmes's trial began in 2021 and quickly became known as the trial of the century for Silicon Valley. In January 2022, the jury found her guilty on 4 counts of investor fraud and conspiracy. By November, she was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. Her legal team tried to keep her out of prison during appeals, but the conviction was upheld in 2023. She and Balwani were also ordered to pay $452 million in restitution. Adding to the drama, prosecutors claim Holmes had booked a one-way ticket to Mexico shortly after her conviction. Her lawyers insisted it was for a pre-planned wedding trip she never intended to take, but the incident raised eyebrows. It seemed Holmes's downfall was not just professional, but personal and very public. Interestingly, in the middle of the legal storm, she married Billy Evans, heir to a hotel fortune, and had 2 children. Some critics suggested the pregnancies were an attempt to gain sympathy or delay prison, but Holmes maintained she simply wanted a family and never thought she'd actually be convicted. By May 2023, when she reported to prison, Forbes had already revised her estimated net worth from $4.5 billion to 0. Her name had become a symbol of startup fraud, even inspiring Hulu's hit series The Dropout. Holmes said she never meant to deceive anyone. As she put it, Theranos failed, but failure is not fraud. The jury, however, disagreed, and her story now stands as one of the most dramatic rises and falls in Silicon Valley history. Now, the only place left for her saga to unfold was behind bars. When Elizabeth Holmes walked through the gates of FPC Bryan in May 2023, she stepped into a completely different reality. The once glamorous tech CEO was now an inmate, swapping her trademark black turtlenecks for shapeless khaki uniforms and tying a blonde hair back in a plain ponytail. The world of private jets and luxury offices was gone. Her new surroundings had razor wire fences, dorm-style bunk beds, and a thin mattress one former prison compared to a kindergarten mat. FPC Bryan, located in Texas, is a minimum security facility for non-violent offenders, but it's far from comfortable. Some people imagine it's an easy club-fed experience, but former inmates say otherwise. Living quarters can be run down, showers have been described as moldy, and hot water in the winter is scarce. One insider summed it up simply by saying, "This is not a camp cupcake." Adding to the unusual mix, one of Holmes's fellow inmates is Real Housewives star Jen Shah. Let's just say that this is a pairing that feels straight out of a headline-grabbing TV drama. However, life inside follows a strict schedule. Most new arrivals are assigned the toughest jobs first, like scrubbing huge pots in the kitchen. Holmes, however, landed in a more academic role as a clerk in the prison's law library, where she helps other inmates with legal forms and re-entry plans. She's also carved out a unique place for herself by teaching French to fellow prisoners and volunteering to counsel women who have experienced trauma. Meanwhile, her daily routine is a far cry from her CEO days. The day starts at 6 a.m. with a head count, followed by a basic cafeteria breakfast. Morning and afternoons are filled with work assignments or classes. Holmes also makes time for exercise, jogging laps around the yard and even lifting weights in the Texas heat. It's a stark contrast from boardroom presentations to power walking in prison sneakers. Holmes has long followed a strict vegan diet, and while the prison menu isn't exactly farm to table, she manages to stick to mostly vegan-friendly options. Still, prison life takes an emotional toll. Holmes has described it as hell and torture, with the hardest part being separation from her family. Visits from her children are rare but precious. She spends those moments building Lego towers on the visitation room floor, holding her toddler son and baby daughter close, and sharing a heart-shaped hand signal when it's time to part. Each goodbye, she says, shatters her, reminding her that she's now Mommy the inmate, not the powerful billionaire she once was. And yet, Holmes hasn't stopped thinking like an entrepreneur. She continues to draft patent ideas from her cell, claiming she still works on research and inventions daily. She's also taken an interest in prison reform, helping to propose a bill aimed at strengthening the presumption of innocence and improving inmate conditions. "This will be my life's work," she declared, adding, "Human beings are not made to be in cells." Holmes' projected release date with good behaviour is 2032. This gives her nearly a decade to reflect and plan her next move. Whether her future will include another big idea or remain in the shadows of her past remains to be seen. For now, her world is defined by strict rules, plain walls, and the long road of time still ahead. So, will we see a redemption arc for Holmes in a decade? Perhaps a memoir, a second act in tech, or at least a tell-all interview where she finally comes clean. Only time will tell. For now, her legacy is a cautionary tale or more of a lesson. So, if you found this saga intriguing, check out our next video on Kevin Hart's watch collection. It's an eye-popping look into celebrity luxury you won't want to miss. See you there.